Welcome back to the Houndsman XP podcast. For this week's episode, we are going to Montana, Marion, Montana, and we are talking to Casey Stutzman. Casey was a guest previously on the podcast, and anybody that knows Casey, you just gotta like the guy. I mean, immediately when I met Casey, I knew that he was the type of houndsman that I wanted to feature on the podcast. So I'm really happy to have him back on here again. We caught up with him back when lion season was winding down for him, and we kind of take a deep dive into what's going on there with mountain lion management and the projects he worked on up there. We've been rigging. We've got a good box shaker strike here, like my buddy Larry Anderson would say. Let's drop the tailgate and dump this box. Well, Casey Stutzman, welcome back to the Houndsman XP podcast, man. The first podcast we did together, I really enjoyed that conversation we had. We got a lot of good feedback on it, and I just wanted to catch up with you a little bit. You guys are, according to you, the snow's disappearing and the hunting's slowing down, and so thought I'd catch up with you and get an update on how everything's going out in the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, everything's been good. No, it's good to visit with you again for sure. We've had kind of an off winter in regards to snow conditions. So it's been a lot of bare ground hunting and hit and miss, freeze and thaw stuff. But it's also nice I haven't had to drag the snowshoes out too. So I kind of like that.
Yeah. Do you guys use trail cameras or anything out there? Is there any reason to?
I personally don't use any trail cameras, but I always love seeing even some good friends of mine. They showed me a bunch of pictures here right behind the house here the other day. You know, some cats crossing and some of that. So it's I think that it's one of the things I probably ought to invest a little time and effort into. For sure.
I don't know how I feel about it. You know, I if I'm training a young dog and I want to get them on good tracks, I could see where it could be beneficial. But the cellular trail camera technology has turned a lot of deer hunters into deer, trophy slayers. I mean, they know what time deer are moving through their property. They get texts of it when they're watching it almost in real time, and I just think that I don't know how I feel about it. If we would start adopting some of that mentality into our hounds, I can see where it could be really beneficial for training pups, and have even thought about that.
Yeah, personally, I guess I haven't ever really thought about implementing it in, but, I could see benefits both ways, but I could see abuses too. I guess it kind of comes down to, what your expectation and what you're trying to get out of it is too, the technology it adds to, and it gives them some advantages, but I don't know, in ways it takes away from too. So I guess I could see it both ways. But
yeah. I think about some of the stuff like, flying a drone, and it's illegal to fly drones in pursuit of game in several states. If you were to do something, but where does it stop? Where does the technology stop on hunting and just the hunter being a hunter? We're dumb in I say it all the time. My Garmin has really dumbed me down. And you might be surprised at this, but I don't worry about even looking at my Garmin when I'm hunting out there in your country, because I can see the peak and I can see the landscape and stuff like that. But you get in a big Indiana flatwoods or, down in the south, down in some of those swamps where you don't have any landmarks. And I used to never have to use my Garmin. I was hunting down there before I had Garmins and never walked the wrong way out of the woods or anything like that. But I get so daggone dependent on looking at that thing now that I think I could just about get lost in my yard anymore. It's ridiculous.
It definitely does take away a fella's, or just paying attention, paying attention when you drop the ridge or something else. Like you just don't even think about it anymore. And they've changed the way I do things. They've given me a lot of advantage to be able to hunt more puppies at a time, and have just more control and less time wasted looking for dogs that fell out or pick them up, whatever it is. But I truly believe it's changed, and I mean that's kind of I guess everybody kind of, I hear a lot of guys complain, or saying it's changed everything, and I think it's for the good, but ultimately my dogs are safer because of it too. I mean,
absolutely, can't take that away.
Dogs. Yeah. When I was kind of late getting into the Garmin game. Everybody else had them for 3-4 years. And I had honestly just finally been able to afford some, radio telemetry, some Johnson Scholars, and had that for a couple of years before the Garmin's came out. And so it was kind of more of a money issue actually. And I was kind of a little skeptical on the battery life. Everybody was, and I was skeptical on them, but I ended up bumping along with another fella one time that had one and was pretty impressed. We'd actually ended up catching a cat and a pup, and it left the tree, and but you could tell, looking at a Garmin, you could tell where it was treated. It was out of hearing where over the ridge where it had happened, and here this pup comes back. Well, we kind of knew. Well, it took us a while to get there. Sure enough, that cat was still in that tree, and we got a couple dogs going. And anyway, we were able to still capitalize on that situation and get some pups started on that same cat. That otherwise you would have just not had any chance. You know what I mean? You wouldn't have known exactly where to go and wouldn't know what happened. And I was like, man, this is a pretty impressive tool. Well, then anyway, it was a couple of years later. I still didn't get them. And I ended up turning loose 10, 12 miles off the highway. And on this dumb little cat I finally found in the afternoon. And it was just a little subadult cat, but it had been traveling apparently. And conditions were pretty poor. And I kept going up the next drainage to hear they were heading kind of towards the highway. But like I said, we were 12 miles as a crow flies. Wasn't too worried about it.
12 miles as a crow flies and 20 miles by foot, up and down.
Yeah, well, and mostly there was a couple different roads, but in order to get, they just kept going out of hearing. So I'd go down to the next drainage, I'd work my way back in there, hike up to where I could hear. I kept getting beeps, and they were heading down, but I couldn't hear them. So I'd drive to the town. Well, this went on all day, and I was just looking for dogs, Anyway, that stupid lion ended up treeing on the bank in a tree 10 feet off the line of the highway. And I didn't find them dogs until into the dark. And when I did, a really nice blue tick Walker female I had at the time, she was only 3 years old, I guess, but she was a superstar already. And she was creamed right there on the edge of the highway.
Yeah.
Another little dog was still treeing. And I said to myself, that would have never happened with GPS. It just wouldn't have, And
right.
That's when I finally bucked down. I actually bought a used system to start with because that's what I could afford. And kid was getting rid of dogs and got 2 or 3 collars and ran them with my telemetry for a long time. And of course now that's all I run. But it really did teach me a lesson that, that's what's so powerful. I run races pretty close to railroads, and we got highways and railroads and rivers and everything else, and just lots of other challenges, and it allows you to navigate those with some control. Yeah. And I'm
not a technology is from the devil type guy. I'm not that guy.
No.
I just look at it.
No, and I'm not. Yeah, I'm not either. But there's also, it's kind of allowing, and this isn't a bad thing either. I'm not by any means knocking it, but because to each his own. But I've been around a few dogs that don't. I was hunting alongside of a fella that got a few dogs. They run silent, and game catching dogs, meat dogs for sure. Nothing wrong with them. But without a tracking system, you don't have a clue where them dogs are at.
Yeah.
And in big country, where those dogs were opening up on a jump, and I got to walk to a few trees that those dogs did a great job. But I have always really valued a big, beautiful ball mouth dog.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really because I think it was formative in me that a hound needs to be honest about its location. And then also just really notice too, behind those dogs, it's terribly difficult to train pups behind them dogs like that.
You bet.
Some pups are pretty good about just trailing up a dog and staying in the action if they know those dogs, and they'll track a dog for a while. The type of dogs I got, they typically, they don't like trailing dogs, if they,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's hard to keep them in those races if you're running silent dogs. But I see a lot of guys all talking about how much they love their silent dogs, and like I said, I can really see some advantages to it. I think you'd shorten up some races. In our country, those dogs will get ahead and get away, get by himself, and ambush a lion all by themselves, and that's kind of problematic. Silent trailing dogs, but I really feel like the GPSs have made it to where people are actually breeding for that style of dog and finding good success with that style of dog.
Mm-hmm. Where
20 years ago, man, that wasn't worth nothing to you.
Well, let me ask you this: so did you hunt some of the same? What traits did you see after you put a GPS on your dog, on your pack? What did you learn about the individual dogs? This is something that came up last week, and we're talking about what if we had a time machine and went back and we could put a GPS, the new Garmin, whatever it is, tracking system on one of these legendary hounds. What would we actually learn about that hound? What did you learn about your dogs once you started using GPS?
Obviously you learn. I don't know. Now it's so second nature that you can kind of fix a race. What I mean by that is when there's a bad lose or a big patch of bare ground, you kind of see the direction of travel, and I can go hike ahead and get ahead and maybe get them dogs back in that. Now you can do that normally, but it just really gives you that line of travel. But what I guess I like seeing those spots where those pups are the first ones finding those loses. You can see, it really gives you a feeling on who's me too and who's doing the work.
That's right. There you go.
It allows you to really see those dogs that are spending time, when they do make a big lose on a corner, on a button hook, on a bobcat or something, how much backtracking they have to do before they figure out where it left. It just gives you that sense about each dog's strengths and weaknesses, so that you can kind of help orchestrate and work them through those strengths and weaknesses. Pretty valuable that way.
Yeah, I tell you what,
sure.
I'll tell you what I learned. So I had a dog that he was a good coon dog, and I even did some winning with him in competition. But he would shut up on the tree, and occasionally he'd just get quiet, and it wasn't a major problem. But when I got my first Garmin and put it on him, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching the screen, and he goes silent, then he starts showing movement. So he was actually coming off that tree and milling around in there. Now he knew that when I got close, he was going to be, to be belly up on there. But when I wasn't there, then he was down and he was he was just checking and screwing around and doing things like that, which is unacceptable. So it humbled me a little bit, because here's my coon dog that had done some winning in competition. And when I got a Garmin, I'm like, okay. And then I saw things in pups, that I wouldn't have been able to see prior to. But I don't know. It was just a. We didn't get on here to talk about GPS, but it's a funny thing when you start thinking. I wonder how good those old legendary hounds would have actually been if the guy that was hunting them would have had that technology to be able to look at them and really zero in on what they were doing.
It is, and I think of some of that same type of stuff. For me, it's valuable in the fact it really tells the story for what it is, and it allows you to really be honest with what's happening, not necessarily, because there is a tendency when a fella's got leashes and dogs to kind of, you've hunted with the fella who knows exactly everything that went on, and I'm talking about even hunting with guys before any of the technology, and I used to, there's a few guys that I used to just give a lot of grief to because, they knew exactly what happened when something got screwed up. What happened is your dog did this and that. They project as if they know everything that's going on. Well, with them callers though, you really do. You can tell that, that's where that race got started a trash race, and it was that pup that started it, and everybody else kind of failed along for a ways and quit or whatever it was.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
there you go.
There's no denying who did what and how it happened. So, it's definitely kind of a truth teller for sure. And if you're honest with yourself and you're honest with your dogs, it allows you to make changes and learn how to handle those dogs in a way that's going to let them find more success for sure.
I'll tell you what is amazing too, though, and this is a shout out or giving credit to some of the guys that, and I was one of them that hunted before GPS, but I was a young kid that didn't know a whole lot and thought I knew a lot more than I did. But these, the guys that hunted that could tell you, that did know, they knew what was going on with that dog. It's like, man, that bark is not right. And I think he just bumped a fox, just from listening to it, take off the way he took off, or he bumped a deer or whatever. And they knew what was going on. Tritronics, the shot collar, the e-collar's been out for, since the early 80s at least, maybe the late 70s.
Yeah.
And,
I say there's,
and those guys were using it effectively to correct behaviors and stop trash races and different things. And they never had a GPS,
No.
They were doing it all by ear, and it's pre-telemetry too. When we started hunting, we didn't even have beep beeps, no telemetry. It was just shoe leather and listen to them go. And maybe it was tennis shoes and run them down.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and I think the wonderful thing about that, though, and this is back and kind of to conclude the talk about GPS and the benefits or the negatives. I feel like, I find myself, not necessarily always putting down as many boot tracks as I ought to, because I know they're going to make a loop and come back. Right.
Right.
But you do miss out. And so I kind of have to intentionally just start hiking and go and look for kills and be close enough to correct, while you're in there and help something or be there when it happens. And you just get to see so many cool things when you're out in the woods and not sitting at the pickup,
Yeah.
And, so I just think, your dog so much better if you're staying close enough that you can hear them and you're staying right with them. And I don't know that. I've always enjoyed that side of running my hounds. And so, but I find myself, I have to intentionally make myself do it, because you don't necessarily always need to do it now to be successful. And actually sometimes it can be a disadvantage, because you're a couple hours, you end up a couple hours from your pickup, where if you would have just stayed put, you could have drove pretty close, kind of a thing. So, So I don't know. There's definitely advantages, but man, to me, it's still so satisfying to be able to hear the race. If my dogs go out of hearing, I just got to get to where I can hear them,
Yep.
And,
yep. I think that's a good way to, that's a good way to end in this part of the conversation.
Yeah.
You just told us why you should put the Garmin down occasionally and get out there. It improves your abilities as a houndsman to know what's going on. I mean, if just because you play Call of Duty on Xbox doesn't make you a Navy SEAL, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think the key is just not letting it control how you hunt. I mean, use it as a tool and use it to help you, but don't let it dictate what you do, and make sure you're enjoying hounds for what they are, and make sure you're still breeding for real voices, and and
yeah.
But
do you still carry a compass?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yep.
Like you said, though, hunting the mountains, I don't know. I'm lost as can be down in the flatlands and river bottoms and stuff. I get all scared, but being in the hills, I don't know. I guess that's just what I know. But
I get scared when I look into some of those drainages and the hounds are down there. I get scared when I start thinking about having to walk out of there. That's when that's when I get scared. I'm like, ugh, I don't know.
Yeah. There's definitely, I always ask myself, I'm not the smartest all the time. I tend to turn loose pretty late in the day, and then it doesn't hit you till you're hiking out of them places in the dark, and you're thinking, what am I doing? But clock struck late, gotta go. So what do you do? I don't know. Yeah.
So tell us about what do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about?
Oh, it's good. We'll catch you up to a little bit on that lion study we've been fortunate enough to be a part of. We talked about that last time, and this season, in order to do that study well, it does take pretty decent conditions. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
the line study, absolutely. So you sent me some information. We had this discussion a couple of weeks ago about the study you've been involved in, and it intrigues me. But so give us an update on the line study, where you guys are at in the study, and just recap some of the goals that you're trying to accomplish with this particular study you've been involved in, Casey.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess to complete that, or I'll catch you back up to that thought in a minute. But so the study, it's a population monitoring study, and it's kind of the only one of its kind. Nobody's really ever tried doing it before because it's difficult. It's not an easy. Anybody who's any biologists that know that it's hard to really pinpoint, and most of that work in most species now is kind of getting taken over in just computer modeling, and they don't really do as much on the ground work. And so I'm kind of, it's kind of a cool thing that Montana is willing to put forth the effort to try to do this. And there's a few scientists that have, put together all the science behind it. They tested that model for several years, and like anything, I don't, what they do with the data is all, of course, out of our control. But this particular deal, what they're trying to do is they've broken up the state into ecoregions, where basically the habitat kind of dictates lion densities, if you will.
Right.
In other words, you know what I mean? So different types of terrain, obviously, they're going to have, and different, densities of ungulates. They're going to be able to support more or less lions kind of based on their, the ecology of that region. So they've kind of broke down the state more based on the topography and vegetation and elevation and ungulates. So that's broken the western part of the state into basically 3 ecoregions, is what they're calling them, lion ecoregions. And then within those regions, there's 2 different study areas within each of those 3 regions. So there's 6 study areas total.
Okay.
And so you enter. So we've been in ecoregion 1 here the last 2 years, and last year was the main study area for ecoregion 1. So that gives you a baseline data for that. And then there's kind of I can't think of the right word, but it's a check area, another area to kind of make sure your data is accurate. So so we moved to another piece of ground. It'd be the Upper Clark Fork, and all that country there. up against the Idaho border.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's quite a bit different. It's not necessarily different eco-region wise, but it has its own different, peculiarities. It's managed through a different management system, if you will. They have some a hybrid season in there so to preface that, the lions are managed in the northern part of ecoregion 1 through drawing only. So you have to draw a tag to be able to harvest a mountain lion.
Right.
Okay. A lot of the state is managed under just quota systems. You can buy an over-the-counter tag, and you can harvest a lion as long as that quota hasn't been met in that unit. Once that unit fills its quota, that area is closed. Yeah. This particular area is unique in the fact that they've got it on what they call a hybrid. So in other words, basically it's still on a drawing. You draw a tag, but but at February 1st, it opens to, or it turns into a quota, basically, and any legal tag holder then can come in and harvest, you can buy an over-the-counter tag.
Yeah,
you can
general season. Yeah,
it just turns into a general quota managed area. So that's changes the harvest, quite a bit in that area. It turns into kind of a rat race once that opens up. And they, I guess from an ungulate standpoint, they were trying to take more predators out of that area, and that's why they went to that. And it does definitely have that effect on that particular zone. They harvest a lot more cats out of there.
How many lions are you talking about taking to fill that quota for that region?
Well, yeah. So it's broke down into several different units. With like even the study area that we were working in, it kind of represented several different hunting units. I think the quota in that area, which I'm trying to give you,
just give us an average, just an average per.
Yeah, let's just say like 30 miles. That study area is maybe 30 miles wide, by probably 50 miles long, something like that. Maybe even a little bit bigger than that. And it's pretty much 90% of that's actually Forest Service and state ground, so it's pretty accessible. They harvest close. I think their quota in there ends up being like 50 lions harvested out of that area, and I think they met. I should have looked and paid attention closer, but I think they met their quota. They may have been 1 or 2 cats off in one unit in there. And most of that ends up being outfitted animals, so that are taken during that hybrid season.
So is it broken down between males and females, male and female quotas?
Yep.
So once you reach the female quota, the unit closes, or how does that work?
No, they just have a specific male and a female quota. So,
okay.
Let's just say in this particular corner, this unit, you can harvest 7 females and 6 males, or vice versa. They have, but so it might be close to males, but you can still harvest a female there, or close to females, you can harvest a male.
Right.
So,
right. Okay.
So they harvest, or they're pretty hands-on, I guess, which I've always kind of been somewhat critical with the state of Montana, and the fact that I've always said that they try to manage lions with a scalpel, and using the tool of a houndsman, you can kind of be that way. You can dictate this many females, this many males. You can really tinker with a population, but it seems like the tendency is to always kind of keep tinkering. This year they want you to kill males. Next year they want you to kill females. It's kind of like a big pendulum swing. They want you to take a bunch a year, and then we don't want you to take any. And that's being a little critical on them, but it seems like to me that most states that kind of have a more relaxed feel, it kind of balances itself out. You end up having a fairly even harvest of females, adults, toms, and it kind of works its way out. Now, some years it just depends on the pressure there. Some years it can be even as much as 1 or 2 hunters can really affect the quota in a unit. If you got a guy who doesn't care and he's got a bunch of buddies that have tags, and he's got 4 weeks off of work at the right time when the weather's good, they'll go in there and slaughter a bunch of, subadults and females and really affect that particular unit for a few years. But then you have other guys that are pretty selective and my take on it is it's, even as houndsmen, I think guys get a little bit too worried about it, too critical as far as, they'll shame some guy for shooting a big female or something. And don't get me wrong. I mean, if I'm going to harvest a cat, I'm going to harvest a good lion. But if it's a legal lion and it was done in the right way, and it's meeting harvest objectives, and then there's nothing wrong with harvesting a female out there. You know what I mean? So anyway, that kind of
I agree with you. And a couple things you said a couple things there. One is the benefits of using hounds for this scientific data collection, this biological data collection. I've thought about this a lot. So that is why, and I've used this argument, I just used it on the Nevada issue when I wrote a letter to them. You need houndsmen on the landscape because they provide valuable scientific data to you, the wildlife managers. You're making the rules, and you need that houndsman that can provide you with this data to manage that resource properly. And the flip side to that is, all these people want to run out and talk about, let's get rid of hounds, let's get rid of hounds, let's get rid of hounds. But we know, and the biologists know, how valuable they are. So if we make this a barbaric, antiquated method for hunting because we're basing it on emotion and all this stuff, where are the professionals, the biologists, going to find the houndsmen to do the work that they need done? They're not going to exist.
Yep. No, and I mean, they'll exist in forms of just contracted, depredation hunters. I mean, you look at states that have lost their.
But you know how that goes, Casey. You know how that goes, though. I mean, so say you were a contracted hunter. You're a government contracted hunter. Are you going to share what you know with other houndsmen, or are you going to share what your breeding practices and make that general knowledge? Not if you're making, if that's your absolute livelihood. I don't see that happening. Human nature tells me that won't happen. So eventually that contracted hunter is going to become, he's going to get old. He's going to get fat. Yep. He's going to get lazy. He's going to lose dogs. He can't maintain a strain of dogs by himself in a way that can make his hounds. You lose dogs. Where are you going to replace them? How are you going to replace them?
Yeah, no, and there's obviously validity in that, but I think, I think from the legislative level, it's such a goofy, and it's such a crazy argument. You look at states like California or other states that have lost their lion hunting or bears, and they're still getting harvested. There's still depredation hunters out there doing it. They're doing it, with the taxpayer dollars, though. They're not doing it. They're not, the hunters
Absolutely.
are willing to do it and pay to do it. And, and so it's such a goofy thing, because these people that think they're saving the animals, the predators are still being managed because they need to be managed. They still cause problems. There's still incidences. There's a rise in incidences, obviously, but,
right.
And Washington's dealt with that. Oregon's dealt with that. And, so, there's a definitely, but I see what you're saying too, in regards to, the guys aren't going to be there eventually.
Yeah.
Those guys, they're able to draw from other states that do have good dogs and guys. They're, so those depredation hunters are keeping going because they're able to purchase dogs out of other states. But
that's the key right there. But so California, you can't hunt there. But guys are still, they're still hanging on. There's still a good, solid group of houndsmen there. But eventually, if we keep whittling this thing down, go find an Irish setter that can retrieve a bird now. You know what I mean? Because people will start getting away from the hunting purpose of our hounds and then use it for, a pet breed or something like that. And then what are we going to do? And we may, and go ahead. I can go off on a tangent on this.
Yeah, I can see that. No, I think it is, it's valuable to note though too, that the managers and the biologists recognize the value of the hound, groups. Now obviously there's bad apples in all of them that are a problem, but by and large, it's the legislative level that we have to continue to inform and share, because, and not in all states necessarily, and not in all departments, but we've been fortunate here in Montana to have a pretty good relationship with the managers. Now, there's times that they do things that we don't like, and they don't by any means, there's been times, especially us as hounds, when we're always advocating, for the lions, they're wanting more harvested, and we squawk pretty, and they know good and well that if they're going to start raising, lion quotas and stuff, that the houndsmen are going to throw a fit. But we don't necessarily have a problem with the managers, I guess is what I'm saying, as a general whole.
Right.
These states, the problems, and I would venture to say that there was some logical, free thinking biologists and managers in those states that were frustrated to see that tool for management disappear, because the legislature out of their toolbox, because they don't have any way to accurately manage. And that kind of comes back to, to this tool in regards to research, for this study, it's definitely,
before you get off of that, that point you just made, wildlife management is a lot of different parts. And, like, you can use computer models when you have accurate harvest data. Take white-tailed deer, for instance. Easiest thing, because everybody checks in deer and all that stuff for everybody to understand. Took me a few years of hunting in Montana to understand the hybrid and the quota and how that all rolls out. But when you look at white-tailed deer, every deer is checked in. So it's broken down by county. So they take that, they take the number of car deer accidents, they take the number of, several different numbers to come up with what is the bag limit for that animal in that area. So, that's why that's something that California lost in their management tools, is that harvest data that they don't have anymore. So they don't know how many lions they have.
Yeah. And just, and there's a lot of other methods that they use to track data. They're doing a lot of, camera trap type stuff. They're doing doing other DNA with hair samples, and things like that. But lions are just tough to manage. I mean, they're tough to, to determine. They're reclusive.
You bet.
They're difficult. And so much of that harvest data, it is important, and they value that, I'm sure. And for years, that's been their only real tool, is like, okay, so we gave out, or we allowed 12 animals to be harvested in this particular unit, and they closed that quota in. But it doesn't necessarily mean that. It might be that that's, that particular drainage or that particular unit. It just so happens that, a guy from another part of the state to hunt with him that week, and they all had tags. Because of that, it doesn't necessarily mean that there was an overabundance of lions, but maybe the access was incredible in there, and so 80% of the lions in that unit got harvested, maybe,
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
There's just too many factors that affect that particular thing. Now, I think in deer hunting, other things, more of those things are even. But with cat hunting specifically, weather plays an enormous role in the success of the and that changes from year to year to year.
Right.
And so you can't really just say that last year they closed it in 4 weeks and this year they closed it in 6 days. And so it must be a ton more lions in there this year. It doesn't necessarily work that way.
Right. How many lions have you seen? How in the wild, not in trees, like crossing the road or just out? How many mountain lions have you seen, Casey?
I've seen quite a few, but I've also, I've worked in the woods most of my life. So,
yeah.
And I'm always driving 3-4 in the morning. So I see them crossing highways and things like that. But I've probably seen 6 or 8 myself, in the wild. I was trying to think. A few of those I've seen while I was lion hunting and, didn't have any dogs down, but just saw them.
Yeah, it's just always a unique thing because
it is.
People as many hours that you spend cutting timber in the woods, driving to and from those job sites, the number of hours you spend in the mountains looking for lions, lion tracks, lions and everything. We're talking less than a dozen. In how many years?
In 21 years. So
I'm going to take us down a goat path here or a rabbit path here real quick. But when I was working, I would have people call me and tell me that they saw mountain lions, saw cougar here in Indiana, and see him and I had one guy tell me one time, it's like, I see him every morning when I go to work. and I'm like, and I always tell him, I was like, do you realize there's people that live in where they actually have mountain lions, a lot of them, that don't see them. So I think you're seeing somebody's lab up in their yard. This one guy's like, are you trying to tell me I don't know what a mountain lion looks like? I said, no, I'm trying to tell you don't know what a Labrador looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Or I'm not questioning what you think you saw. It's just, there may have been some hallucinogenics involved, possibly too. You never know. I mean, there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings too. So,
absolutely.
So I think that to preface that too, is I live in the most lion dense part of the, probably of the lower 48, really. So, or one of the more dense. Yeah. And so that numbers is also altered by that factor.
Right. Well, give us a real quick rundown on the 30,000 foot view of what you're trying to accomplish with this study and what you have accomplished so far, and how much longer you're going to do it.
Yeah. So to get back to that a little bit, we this year in the secondary study area within that ecoregion 1. And so they'll be able to have some comparison between those two areas. Like I said, they're managed a little bit different, but basically the same format is applied each season. As far as search effort to, all the data you acquire is based on search effort, and then capture, recapture. So which is basically a matter of some of these animals will get sampled more than once. Now I'm talking about taking a DNA sample. So,
right.
So you work your way through this area more than one time, with real thorough search effort in an organized fashion. It does have some levels of randomness built into it and stuff too. But the whole point is then the managers can then take that data and they can start to track trends. So there's 2 years spent in ecoregion 1, which is in the northwest part of the state. There'll be 2 years spent in ecoregion 2, which is kind of the central western and part of the state. And then in the southwest part of the state, ecoregion 3, there'll be 2 different years spent down there, and then it'll cycle back again. And then they can kind of re-enter, as they may not do it every year, but they can re-enter those same study areas, do the exact same thing, and be able to kind of track patterns and be able to help make good management decisions based on on actual data. So not just on hunches. So
yeah. That's all
yeah.
good stuff, man. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're involved in that, Casey, because you're invested in it, and I think you believe in what you're doing. You're a good houndsman too, so that's why you're on Houndsman XP, because you're a good houndsman.
Well, I don't know about that. It's been a fun thing. There's a lot of neat aspects to the type of work. For one, it kind of gets me out of my own backyard and pushes me into some new areas. And like this was completely new. I have to take that back. I'd hunted down there a few times, but it's, where I'm at right now is 3-4 hours away from the house. And it's good hunting. It's different. A lot of it's steep and nasty here. And I don't know, it wasn't like all roses and unicorns down there for sure. But lots of areas. There's quite a few houndsmen hit it, and they harvest a lot of cats. So cats that are there, there were a lot of runners, man. We've had a lot of hard running cats. I think have been messed with a lot, and it's rough enough country that those cats, if they want to run hard, they're going to get away from most dogs. And so that was interesting, just a different dynamic there. But yeah, it makes you go explore a new place every day, and so
That's
excited
cool.
about that. Yeah, and you get to see so many other cool things.
Did you learn anything about your dogs? Taking them into that area like that? Did you learn anything about?
Yeah, for sure. And and anybody who hunts a lot of different areas, if you've hunted specifically in, let's just say within a couple hours of your whole life, you get real familiar with a lot of that country, and there's just a level of confidence and a little, when you can drive down the road and you caught one there and you caught one there, there's lots of memories, and there's something a little intimidating at first about diving into this big, ugly, rocky, nasty place and thinking, what am I getting into? And you don't know where the wolves are. You don't know, you don't know the temperament of those packs of wolves that are in those areas. Well, you've kind of learned that in your own area. So there's and access, you don't know, it shows a road on your map or it shows a trail on your map, but you don't know how good that is or if it's accessible. And so yeah, that kind of adds a level of, but I enjoy that. I guess I like that.
It's the adventure
challenge.
part.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the cool thing, is it's adventurous, I kind of chuckled a little bit when you said, guys hunting within 2 hours of their house. You kind of learn and to put this in perspective a little bit, everything's 2 hours away out there. The country's huge, so it's going to take you a while to. What's that loop? The loop that goes from Rhodes Draw that goes up by Bitterroot Lake, goes up through that country, goes up go up through Tally Lake, and come all the way around, and you come into Marion.
Yeah, you can go up through Griffin Creek and then down through Star Meadows and all that country.
Yeah, I mean,
West Low
on bare roads, just on gravel. This last summer, I did that loop a couple times, and it would take me a good hour and a half, 2 hours of just driving that road. So that's on gravel, let alone this. I'm not chaining up. I'm not trying to bust drifts. I'm not trying to. So, but around here, if we've got places like that, 30 minutes, if I hunt 30 minutes away from my house, then, I'm hunting new territory or territory I don't normally hunt. So it's always interesting to have that perspective of how you guys hunt out there.
What's crazy too is this country, there's, it's all been logged. There's a lot of logging access. And so a lot of that stuff's getting gated up, and there's different access into some of it, some better than others. But if you can hunt, you could hunt for 5 years and darn near hit different roads every day and within 2-3 hours of the house and never cover it all. If you're willing to get out and not just keep going down the same roads and the same main roads, if you really cover it, it's hard for people to grasp how much real estate there is. And
it's unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful thing. It's also why we can have a lot of houndsmen in this country and everybody can get along well, is because if you bump into somebody, you just go somewhere else. If you see tire tracks going down that way, you go somewhere else. And so we were able to do that a lot here, and that, that not everybody gets to do that. A lot of places, man, there's kind of one main road up each drainage, and if those have been hit, or unless you have some good private access or something like that, you can have way too many houndsmen in a real hurry. Everybody feels like they're in each other's way. So,
yeah, you get down towards Condon down there in that Swan Valley. If you're trying to hunt from the road, you run out of places to go pretty quick. Unless you can get off on a sled or on a track side by side and get up in there, you usually can get away from it. But just 3 different groups of houndsmen trying to run that Swan Valley down through there, you're going to run into somebody, and up there where you're at, you got all the road access all over the country. Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, like everybody says, it's like when, you still bump into people for sure, but that really does help. I know a lot of areas that have more like hunter confrontation or trouble because every time it feels like it's their spot or whatnot, and that mostly has to do just the tougher access for sure.
Yeah.
So
to
bump back up a little bit there to that study. Next year, the plan is to be starting into that ecoregion too. So another new piece of real estate, and so hopefully still be a part of that, and keep on going. But it's kind of winding down for this season. On the study, I'm supposed to head down there here for a few days this week, but it's kind of been bare ground and everything's bared off. All the game's down in the bottom, so there's a lot of snow up high, but there's nothing in any of that. And so they've been snowmobiling through a lot of that, trying to get through it to prove it out that there's nothing there. And that particular area, we don't feel quite as good. If we know the area and we know what's going on, we don't mind rodent dogs and getting something going, but it doesn't really necessarily always bear forth the right data, if that makes any sense. I mean, we can go and hit the crossings and get a cat caught.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if that's within your given area to go do, that works fine. But we can't just go, and it's not like we're just going and hitting all the good spots. You know what I mean?
You got to check the bad spots too.
Yeah. And so if you're going to thoroughly road, you still got to thoroughly road through 85 miles of nothing to be able to prove out that there's nothing there if there's no snow. And so we do that sometimes if it works. But the biggest challenge we have is in this time of year, the wolves are getting more territorial towards their den sites, and in country that you don't know, wolves that you don't know, you're kind of asking for problems doing some of that.
So you've got all the wolves tamed down around Marion, is what you're saying?
Well, no, not by any means, but I've had a few killed. Had a few killed in the first of April, rodent dogs in the dirt, and not know what I get into. So,
so do you have any? Do any of your hounds rig? Will they rig a lion out of the box when you're on the road?
Yeah, for sure. We, things have to be right. You got to have conditions have to be right. Age of that track's got to be right, and wind's got to be right. Humidity's got to be right. But if it's there and since available, dogs do rig pretty well. So it's funny. I've traveled to other places and some of those places, those dogs, I truly believe that, so much of that is due to specifically to certain areas, and dogs have struggled to strike in certain areas, and some places they strike like it's nothing. So humidities and pressure and just all that makes a difference, but it's not necessarily always the most accurate. Now, I'm not saying that the right guys with the right dogs might have better, by all means, better strike dogs.
Mm-hmm.
My dogs strike when it's good,
Yeah.
And they sift and sort, pretty well. But, and I've had better strike dogs in the past that were, really, really cold strike dogs. But back to the same thing. And I love doing that. That's the most fun thing in the world to me, is roading and rigging, starting stuff. But just being in the woods this time of year is a wonderful, it's just a nice time of the year. But back to the whole thing with the study, it doesn't necessarily always bear out real accurate information, data. So, so they kind of steer us away from that. If we're successful and consistent, then they've been letting us keep going with that. But it does kind of, we're going to have the most accurate data if we've got good snow to tell what we're doing. So,
yeah. Well, Casey, what kind of dogs you're a student of breeding, and that's how I always describe you to anybody I talk to. You always look a little deeper than and a little farther out than just what you've got on hand. You're always planning 2 or 3 generations down the road, it seems like. So what is the most important trait that you want in your hounds?
Well, I think, we've kind of visited this before a bit, but I think too, desire is obviously, the most important thing. We've talked about, and I think that needs to go alongside of brains, but we're pretty, I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm kind of a little bit too picky at times, because I kind of want it all. And that sounds maybe a little greedy, because it's not like if I have a dog that just is really good with one area, it doesn't mean I'm going to be satisfied with it. But boy, if you ever lose desire and heart, you just got to have dogs. That's what makes dogs that'll sift and sort the wind for hours on end on the top of the truck or out of the box. And it's the same dogs that'll road and pound and still be searching, whether you're picking up, casting them, or putting them in front of a rig or in front of a horse. You've got to have those dogs that are constantly looking and have an expectation to find something. That's what makes dogs cold, in my opinion, too. It's that desire to work with an infinitesimal amount of scent.
Cold nosed?
Yep.
Let's talk about this. Okay. Because I did that podcast on scent, and it seems like, other than what kind of dog food do you feed, who has cold-nosed hounds is the next favorite question that gets beat to death on, or what is a cold-nosed hound is the next question that gets beat to death on social media and the internet. But, man,
it's a funny topic for sure. Oh, well, I was just going to say is that it's kind of a funny topic too, because I think so many people that think they want really, really cold-nosed dogs, they don't necessarily always. They don't necessarily, they're not the kind of guy that wants to be out there grubbing along and not moving much on a bad track and not catching a lot today. Those are, a lot of guys, they want a cold-nosed dog because they can't get nothing started with what they got.
Well, it's cool to talk about too. You can't take back the cool factor of having, I've got the cold-nosed dog.
Yeah. Back to the same thing as, dogs that are cold striking dogs, they're not that useful to a lot of guys, because they're striking, bear scent or cat scent. That's and this is hard for people to understand, but that can't be really ran.
Exactly.
There's a few spots of scent, and that dog's going to open and he's going to locate that scent. And he might even be the type of dog that'll go all the way to the bottom of the drainage to go find it, and he might sift and sort, and you might get a few barks out of him down there, but that's not a runnable track. And that same dog might continue and maybe even take that, what we'll call a non-runnable track. That super cold dog with a lot of desire to continue to work it, and a handler who's allowed him to learn those traits. And
there it is right there.
Has allowed him to continue to work and not just pulled him out when he can't blow it out of the country quick. So he's been developed as a cold nosed dog. That dog still, then he might keep bumping that track for a half mile down that creek in the next hour or two. But a lot of guys now, he might just be able to bump it down the creek for an hour or two, and then he gets around the corner and that thing was bedded up, and boom, you've got a race and it's treat, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
So that's why we love a cold nosed dog, is because it will produce something on those really marginal tracks, right? In those marginal spots, and you'll have something to go run today when everybody else is all the way back at the house already.
Yep.
So,
and that's the cool factor.
Yeah.
Everybody else was back at the house saying, "Oh, we couldn't get anything going," and it's like, well, let me tell you a story. There I was at the bottom of the drainage, and snow. The sun was setting, and Old Blue kept rolling.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the reality of that, though, is, and that does happen, for sure, and you'll get that jump, and that dog will carry you through on days when when nothing else could get going. But let's just say 8 out of 10 of those days, though, they end up in the dark down there pulling Old Blue out of the creek jaw because he's still plugging away on that worthless old track. Okay. And so instead those cold nosed dogs make you miss your daughter's birthday party. You know what I mean?
Exactly. There you go. So, okay. So what type of houndsman would you say actually needs a cold nosed dog? Because I hear what you're saying, and maybe I'll fill in some gaps here.
Yeah,
because most people, it's not exciting, for the most part. I mean, you're not going to stack up a lot of body counts, or you're not going to have a lot of grip and grins at times. I know my friends in the Southwest, I mean, they're talking about running cats for 2 days, and never catching up to them.
Yeah. I think, as much as I say, a lot of guys don't really, I love that kind of dog, and they're incredibly useful tool. Part of me has always thought of a cold nose as a throttle, it's in a pickup. You don't necessarily always have to use it, but it's nice to have it there. The difference is having dogs that can grub like that, but they pick their head up and really push. Yeah. And that's a fine line, because there's dogs that just love to just plug away, and they just, and it's pretty funny, you read stories and those guys in the Southwest, and they talk about having the coldest nosed dog they ever had. And, they usually have the lion skinned out, and they're ready to pack him out when that old cold nosed dog shows up on that race, and the point being is that,
I've also heard those same guys, and I've heard those stories, but they'll also recognize that, that dog got him through a lot of problems. The other dogs would have a loss, and that dog would keep them rolling. So they keep it around, because
Absolutely.
When everything else goes to nothing, then he's still going to be there, and he's going to keep on working. He's, Yep.
Yeah. But talking about guys that can, benefit from that. I mean, it's the guys that have to get it done. If you're outfitting or if you're doing, work, and it's not just out there having a good day and maybe we trailed the waves and didn't get nothing started. I mean, if you got somebody paying you money to get a job done, you need dogs that are going to keep on pounding. Mm-hmm. And that allows you to get a direction. And maybe that pounding didn't get you much, but it gave you a direction. And I'm going to cut ahead 2-3 miles, go cut a ridge or a saddle, and try again there. And that's, so there's, and then there's certain sport guys that just like that style of hunting. The other guys that benefit from it is the guys that just truly hunt in terrible conditions. And I'm kind of the guy who believes that there's terrible conditions anywhere you go if you hunt on those days.
Right.
So just because a person, now there's going to be a lot of difficult trailing days in the desert, more difficult days, I should say, in the desert and in certain parts of the country than than there is in coastal Oregon or something.
And you've hunted the desert. I just want to get that
Yeah.
out there. So so that you're not talking, you're talking from experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so really what that, but I also have felt like, there's some pretty terrible days up here, contrary, to everybody's belief that every day is just juicy and perfect and 6 inches of fluffy snow. Now we get those days and we take full advantage of them. But if you're willing to go every day, then it's a lot of 60-degree days and, 10-degree nights and freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing. And so some of the same things apply like down there, where you got to be getting on that track and get it moved across them bare faces before, 9:30 in the morning when the sun hits it. It's just as evaporated as it is down there in somewhere else. You know what I'm getting at? So,
right.
There is times though when I can go and put dogs down on a 5-day-old track and they're going to trail it really well, because that track's preserved in the perfect environment,
Right.
And, and so, but there's days that I've got a jumped lion that I know this track we made a lose on or something. And I found it where it crossed again. And I get dogs on there and I know that stupid thing's only an hour and a half old at max because I just drove through here and those dogs cannot handle that track, and you're ready to get rid of every dog you got and start over thinking what's going on here, but it's just the nature of that particular environment, that particular day. So,
but without that drive, that dog will never figure it out. If you want to talk about cold nose, you take that and you bring what you just described back east here to the coon hunting world, and people will look at you like you have just lost your mind. We don't need a dog that is going to run a 4-hour-old coon track. I mean, it's just not needed. My old partner, Donnie Walson, he said, I'm out here to look at raccoons. I'm not out here to stand here and build fires and keep my feet warm. If my feet are getting cold, I'm hunting the wrong dog. So, it's completely different. And I think I was thinking about this the other day. I want to get your take on it. I see a lot of houndsmen back here that, talk about the tracking ability of hounds not being present in some of our coonhound breeds in the East. And I started thinking, maybe we're looking in the wrong place for those tracking abilities. Instead of going, on this side of the river and looking for that Grand Night champion, maybe we need to be looking out west to some of these hounds that are still very much track-oriented type dogs and trying to, maybe not make a complete outcross, but at least, maybe it is a complete outcross, but you can still find family lines of dogs in the West that could be helpful. Do you think there's any merit to that? Or have I just, I think of these brainless things when I'm doing brainless jobs, like cutting firewood or, things like that. My mind wanders off on things like that.
Yeah. I think unless you get to the point where you don't have a lot of coons, it's probably not necessary because, back to the whole thing about who needs cold nosed dogs is guys hunting in places where they're just flat ain't that much game. And, cause then you have to be able to capitalize on that one track I found this week or the last 2 weeks. Then I better be able to get something going here with this one, cause there's just not, I'm going to have to wait another 2 weeks before I get another opportunity. Yeah. Well, I sure want dogs to try hard, but if you can go around the corner and everywhere you go, there's good scent laying there. You're never going to really need good dogs. And probably the most successful dogs are going to be the dogs that go over the difficult tracks and that frees them up and they don't waste a day catching one and instead they go catch three,
Right. But do you think it would be beneficial for the Eastern coon hunter to research some of the big game lines out west if they're looking for more tracking ability in their hounds.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, for sure. Because like back to the same thing here, you just have to have trailing dogs. You can't get away with average trailing dogs if you're going to be real successful. You know, you have to have dogs that'll grind and pound and work. And you know, and so drive and trailing ability and desire, you know, is paramount in really anybody out here that's real successful. So, you know, where, you know, it's kind of interesting too, because, you know, I always talk, you know, in the blue dogs, and I'm by no means like a authority on it, but one story that was told to me was a fellow that he had bought pups off Albert Vaughn and his father had, and he can remember being a little kid going to Albert's and picking up pups, and you know, and later on, and some of these guys that know these lines really, really well can maybe speak to it one way or another, but this fella, he ended up always, in his father always liked the buck bred dogs, and he had a brother that was Mac bred dogs, and Albert in his old age, he liked those Mac bred style dogs because they would go out, catch one, do a nice, beautiful job of it, do it in style, and he'd be home in time to, you know. Yeah. And he said the buck dog is going to catch the last friggin' track on the mountain, and they're not going to quit. They're not going to come home, and they're not pleasurable to hunt. And a lot of those buck type style dogs is what made their way out west, because those guys out west, that's what they wanted, you know. And back east in areas where there's a lot of game and more of a pleasure style of hunting than outfitters and professional type hunters or you know, depredation type work, you know, those you know. But so that the point of that isn't, you know, is that there is something for everybody, and even what you might have enjoyed when you were young may not be what you enjoy when you're an old man.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Mac bred type dog. You know, go out and do something. If I'm going to coon hunt back here, I like being able to be home in time to, you know. Exactly. These days, well, back in the day, I'll get on my high horse. Back in the day, Casey, you know, I was as hard going as anybody out there. No, seriously, and you're right. It's just one of those things that people in different regions have different needs for the type of dog that they hunt. And there is still a reason to have a dog that can run a track on a raccoon, even though it's maybe not Southwest Arizona, you know, Southwest Arizona style lion hunting. We don't need that much tracking desire and that much drive. And I think that's what really separates those types of hounds from the Eastern Coonhound. Is the Eastern Coonhound doesn't need to do that. It's not advantageous for us to have that, but there has to be a balance there. You can't have just a tree and idiot that's all you're breeding for. You still got to have the tracking ability to, you know, run that boar coon in January that's rutting and hitting den trees and moving on, and he may hit a dozen den trees in a night, and you've got to have a dog that's got the drive to figure that out, and the nose and the brains to use that nose to be able to figure that out if you're going to be successful doing that. And when you start talking about money, you know, we've got professional hunters back here too that they hunt competition hunts, and their needs for a dog are much different than what your needs are for a dog. You know, you're not gonna bring home paychecks with a dog that decides it's going to run the track that was laid last night. You need a dog that's going to put as many coons on the scorecard in a 1 hour or 2 hour hunt as you can get.
And so to kind of conclude that topic is exactly, I do believe if there's a guy back there that has dogs that just stand at their feet and won't go get it done, or they're just take the first easy spot that there's some scent laying there to slick tree or something, then, you know, that's the, you know, then obviously, I think that they could head west and probably find some dogs that are just a crazy,
Just a crazy thought I had.
Yeah, but I think too, there is something to be said for, I think a lot of those guys, some guy might, they might read the book and hear the stories, and man, that's what I need. And in all reality, though, it might not be what you need, because if you're hunting a piece of real estate that, you got one chunk of private ground, and those dogs out here, they'll be off that piece of ground so fast and into the neighbors, and you'll just get in trouble. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, so I guess it kind of does go both ways. And the reason I say that too is that I talk to some of those fellas here and there, that they think that's what they want, but I kind of talk them out of it a lot of times, of maybe that isn't kind of the style of dog you want. It's not that they don't want to try one or whatever, and there's other reasons maybe they want those dogs, but it's tough when you read the book. It sounds pretty nostalgic, and boy, those old dogs are maybe pretty amazing, but they may or may not be what you need.
It's funny you talk about reading the book. I mean, you read the Dale Lee book, or you read Slash Ranch Hounds, and you envision yourself on this 3-day-old, 5-day-old lion track, and dirt in the nose in the dirt type pound that's out there, and you're thinking, yeah, that's what it's all about. I can tell you right now that I have no desire to coon hunt in Indiana with a dog that's going to be running a coon track that was laid 3 days ago. It's worthless to me. It's going to be useless to me. But we've got dogs back here that can't run the 1-hour-old track, and that's not acceptable either. So that's the balance that I was thinking about when I was, you see a lot of people saying the nose is going out of a lot of hounds. I wonder how beneficial it would be if we kind of opened our mind a little bit and thought, man, there's still people hunting these cold-nosed hounds. They're just not here. We're going to have to go get them.
Well, and a lot of those bloodlines too, they're not clean anymore. They're still cold, and they still have the desire and the style that works in that area. But those guys, they didn't register nothing, and they bred a little bit of something else here and there into it to whatever made it work. And so, it doesn't work for you going back and, but breeding within, like I say, a registry, there's not that many guys. I mean, there's a lot of guys out here that register dogs, but there's also an awful lot that don't.
Yep.
And so, so those dogs aren't usable for you,
right,
possibly with what you're wanting to do. After they've came here, they got diluted. It may have helped what that guy was trying to accomplish, but
yep.
It may not work for you anymore.
True enough.
But yeah, I've been hunting a bunch of young dogs this year. It was kind of a little rough to start with. I lost a couple. I actually lost, I think, 3 or 4, real nice trained dogs here this fall. Different circumstances, and still had some others that were doing a great job, but I was trying to rotate in, and so I started, I think, 4 young blue ticks that were all about a year old this year, and every one of them was real gamey. So we had to tune down, keep them on the right stuff. But
when you say gamey, you're saying trashy, right?
I'm saying, yeah, super trashy. Yeah, yep.
Let's just call it what it is.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no. Anybody who knows me knows. Sadly, I kind of like that style of dog. That sounds goofy. I like them that figure it out quick when they've been instructed and told what's right, what's wrong. But it doesn't bother me any that a year-old dog wants to run off game if they haven't been corrected.
Right.
So
right.
And there's just yeah. So we hunted 4 young dogs, I guess, this year, and 2 or 3 walker dogs that were young, and so lots of youngsters, and that's just always a full plate trying to do that. And I don't necessarily hunt them all the time while I'm doing the study work too. We want to have cleaner. We can use them here and there, but we want to have good, clean success. We can't afford to have a day wrecked out by a bunch of puppies.
Right.
Trap.
Yeah.
So,
here comes Casey and the kids. Here comes Casey and the kids. There goes our day. It's going to turn into a moose race.
And I had to, it's kind of a funny thing, because anybody that's hunted with me, I always get accused, like old Jim Harrell. He says, "Son, you got no sense. You just dump the box. That's all you do," and it's kind of the truth. I've never necessarily rated my success on how much game I've caught. For me, it's all about getting as much time on each individual as I can. Now, don't get me wrong. I know enough to know that a bad day, they would have been better sitting at home than to go and get wrecked out on something wrong. So I'm not saying that I just am stupid about it, but I do err on the side of just going for it compared to always trying to micromanage the race and the pack of dogs. I kind of just kick dogs out and let them do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just how I've always enjoyed doing it. And so this year I did I found myself actually smartening up a little bit and doing things a little smarter, orchestrating different, making sure I was running the right dogs together, and also that I wasn't wearing dogs out. I had a lot of hard running races this year, and some of that, I don't know what it all was. I mean, necessarily, because it wasn't necessarily all down in that area, but I mean, I had quite a few different races that I'd have that cat jump by, by 9 in the morning or something. And I'd pick up dogs still trailing at dark, 20 miles, on the Garmin, 20, 25 miles, 18 miles, 17-mile races, and never catch them. And the dogs were still cranking, but they're just getting tired, and so that'll once you start having that happen to you, where they act like bear eggs, is why you start realizing that you got to orchestrate dogs a little different if you're going to keep on doing that day after day after day. So
yeah.
So I got a little smarter with making sure I just wasn't wearing everybody out all at once, and making sure I could keep filtering dogs in there. But so it was a lot of learning. I actually learned a lot that way, and it was good for me. And someday maybe Jim won't be. Maybe he'll come hunt again with me someday. Well, what he's mostly referring to too is it's usually 4:00 in the afternoon or something when I decide to dump the box, and he wants to go home. So, so he now, he learned last time. He always brought his own pickup along so he can make sure. But he never would. He never would leave. He'd always feel guilty if he left me in the woods in the dark. So he'd stay. But
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, Casey.
Yeah.
Man, I'll tell you what. I always enjoy talking to you. It's tell me what the best piece of advice you ever got from a houndsman when you were learning.
Boy, I think there's a gentleman that I've gotten most of these dogs from that I got actually now, and one thing he, that he continued to impress upon me though was just be smarter than them dogs. Take the time to figure them out, what's going on. If you got a quirk, something weird that's going on, don't just lose it and get frustrated or call the dog. Be patient and analyze what's truly happening. And I guess to me that's kind of how I try to be, and I see a lot of guys that they don't take it very far, but pay attention to what's truly going on.
Mm-hmm.
Be analytical.
When we were talking before we pushed the record button, we were talking about a young hound that I had that didn't make the grade, and you were talking about I've had good success of hunting them through that, or hunting, taking some of those types of dogs and working them through it. And I think that's what separates houndsman from a guy that has hounds, a houndsman from a guy that likes to hunt, is their ability to boil that down and get down and fix those types of things. I like cars, but I'm not a mechanic. And it's a big difference when you can slow down. That's a good piece of advice. I like that because we try to pigeonhole. I think we try to pigeonhole dogs. This pup. My buddy's got a pup that did this by this age, and so everybody's like, if a dog's not doing it by this age, then it's not worth keeping. And I get the idea that life's too short to nurse a dog along for 3 years hoping that they turn into a dog. That's not what I'm saying. But at the same time, if you pay attention to what a young hound is doing, you can see sparks of greatness in those hounds. And then it's your job to bring it to the surface, to bring that out, to polish that diamond that's in the rough.
Yeah. And you may just be honest with the situation and know that if I was willing to put this much time into it, I know I could bring it out, but maybe it'd be better though to get it in the hands of somebody that can be that patient, because maybe just because of what I have to get done right now, and the work I got to get done with these dogs, I'm not allowed, I'm not able to, but just be honest, and and it's funny because I've gotten a lot of, I've had guys tell me I'm full of it, but, or stupid for trying, but I truly have been able to have a few that were, like you said, you got to see a spark, you got to see something there. But the dogs that, one of the finer dogs I ever owned, he really didn't put it all together till he was a little old, he was 2 years old or something like that. And he'd been in a pile of game. And I was pretty frustrated. And before that I had gotten rid of dogs, quite a few dogs that were at where he was probably at that age, and kind of stuck with him on that one.
But why? Why did you stick with him on that?
Well, he was the only pup that I ended up with out of that same female I told you got hit on the highway. So he's kind of I don't know, there's some sentimental value there or something, and he was out of a
so
and so
you had an emotional investment.
Yeah, and so I put a little extra, and like I said, I seen sparks of little bits of good. It wasn't like he just was standing around, but he had trouble. There was things he wasn't putting together quite right, and things he was putting together the wrong way, and with some patience and a lot of game, he did come through it. Now, like I said, I don't know if some people might not have been able to have enough tracks to be able to ever get that dog through his quirks, For me, it worked out, and I was able to, like I said, he was a tremendous dog. Had I have to look back through the records, but he was at an awful lot of trees for me. And so, patience usually pays off, but just being honest about it, for sure.
Nice. Well, we better wrap this one up, buddy.
Yeah, for sure.
People are going to need a nap break for this one.
Always good to visit and talk dogs, and they it's been an awesome thing. People you meet and these hounds, the things they bring us together and unite us, and I think it's important to keep keeping on and fighting a good fight.
What do you think is going to happen by the time this comes out, it might be history, but, what's your prediction? We'll make note that you're making the prediction prior to the vote in the Senate about bear hunting in Montana. Is it going to go, or is it not going to go?
I don't know. It's kind of funny because we made a go at it here about 10 years ago, maybe a little more than that. I don't remember, but, I've never really felt like there was a lot of things that had to come together for us to really ever feel like we could get this accomplished. And, our legislature is the right bent right now. We've got, we've got the grizzly bear issue isn't what it was, just because, they're fully recovered, obviously. So there's no threat of hurting their overall population. And there's a lot of buffers and things put in place, I think, for that too. But that was always a big one. We felt like as long as they cruise on a dangerous species list, we were going to have difficulty ever getting a pursuit season. And so 10 years ago, and I said, there's just no way, I just don't see it happening. But I'm kind of thinking it's going to happen. I think, like I said, I think a lot of the right things are put together right now, and how that all manifests itself out into a season, that's kind of yet to be seen too. But yeah, if we're going to put in my prediction, I think we're on our way, and I think it's going. So
how cool is that? How cool would that be?
Oh, it's just, yeah, like I said, it's almost kind of like you kind of got to be kidding me. I've always traveled an awful lot to try to keep dogs tired in the summer.
Right.
And so that would be a huge benefit for us to be able to, get a few more pups going and keep more people into it. It's just a wonderful time to be in the woods in the spring and the summer. It's blue jeans and a t-shirt, and the kids get to take part more, and you're not bucking deep snow. And
right.
So, I love that aspect of it. So I think it'd allow that opportunity for some people that might not want to go out in the deep snow and in the cold and everything else. So,
well, I'm hoping, I'm staying hopeful, and no sense in giving people action points on what they can do, because it'll probably be over by the time this comes out. But I'm optimistic. I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of good work out there right now. Seems that they're making the right connections. It's got some good traction, and hope we'll be turning bear dogs loose together here soon. Casey, that'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And it like, there is so many great reasons why it does make sense, just like we talked back to as a management tool and everything else for the state, and more opportunity and revenue. And, it'd be a lot of good in a lot of different ways, So
Yep, for sure.
Well, good to see, for sure. And grateful for all the, a lot of people that have put a lot of time and effort into making it happen. And for all the, non-residents and everybody else too, and other residents, and, for Houndsmen XP, everybody who's kind of getting the word out. I think having a lot of that, social media and everything else, it's really changed the voice that we can have to our legislators, compared to 15, 20 years ago. It is a different dynamic in that regard, and I think that's made a difference. So, everybody who's called up and shared posts and everything else, it really does make a difference.
I agree. See, another instance where technology can be a good thing when we use it the right way. So, well, Casey,
yeah,
I'm gonna wrap this bad boy up, and until we see each other again, until we talk again, you follow your hounds, I'll follow mine.